episode of Let's Talk Media, a web series produced in partnership with Digital Media Connecticut and a new group of Connecticut women, badass filmmakers, female filmmakers, BFFs. Through this web series, aspiring filmmakers and media professionals are invited to join Connecticut women in live conversations via YouTube Live about their careers in independent documentary filmmaking. Each episode features an hour of conversation, followed by 30 minutes of questions from the virtual audience. As tonight's episodes evolves, please take advantage of the YouTube chat box to submit questions to the panelist, which we will ask during our question and answer section after the panel discussion. And I'm thanking Dr. Agnes Moshi, who is standing by to take your questions. Now, let me introduce myself and our panelists. I'm Karen Ritzenhoff. I teach in the Department of Communication at Central Connecticut State University, where I offer classes in global visual communication and women in film and digital media and cinema. I'm tonight's host, and I'm thrilled to welcome our incredible guests, Tracy Heather Strain and Karyl Evans, who are going to share their insights and expertise in tonight's Let's Talk Media live stream about taking advantage of opportunities, finding the network after graduation. Let me start to introduce Tracy Heather Strain. She's an educator, an award-winning director, producer, and writer of documentaries and nonfiction media. Committed to using film and video to bring diverse and often unknown stories to light in order to advance social justice, build community, and empower the marginalized in engaging ways, Strain has created and collaborated on a range of projects for public television, museums, and other nonprofits over the past 34 years. In 1999, she won a Peabody Award for her first two feature documentaries as part of Blackside's six-part PBS series, I'll Make Me a World, A Century of African American Arts. And another Peabody Award last year for the American Masters television broadcast of her latest directing effort, Lorraine Hansberry, Sighted Eyes, Feeling Heart. We're going to see a little excerpt very soon. The first feature film about the late artist activist who is best known for writing the play, A Raisin in the Sun. This biodoc, which premiered at the 2017 Toronto International Film Festival, also netted Tracy a 50th NAACP Image Award for motion picture directing last year, then the American Historical Association's John E. O'Connor Film Award, and a Creative Arts Emmy producing nomination. Tracy is a beloved professor of the practice, teaching documentary production, storytelling, and history at Wesleyan University's College of Film and the Moving Image, and she co-directs the newly established Wesleyan Documentary Project. At the Film Posse, the company she co-founded with her husband, business partner, and university colleague who's also teaching at Wesleyan, she's presently producing, directing, and writing a National Endowment of the Humanities funded documentary about L. Frank Baum and the Wonderful Wizard of Oz for American Experience with McLaury. We would like to show a trailer for you now about Lorraine Hansberry, Sighted Eyes, Feeling Heart.
Serious drama that has at least the objective of making a larger statement about life, I think sooner or later has to become involved in its time.
Lorraine Hansberry is hugely important for having written A Raisin in the Sun, the most celebrated play by an African-American author, considered one of the great plays of the 20th century.
Looking in the mirror this morning, I'm thinking I'm 35 years old. I'm married 11 years, and I got a boy who's got to sleep in the living room because I got nothing, eh? Nothing to give him but stories.
She was reaching into the essence of who we were, who we are, where we came from.
It isn't as if we got up today and said, what can we do to irritate America?
Lorraine was a very political person. Her plays, that to me is her jumping off place.
She's fighting the oppression of women. She's fighting against race discrimination, poverty, class.
Lorraine wasn't just a conventional mainstream liberal. Lorraine was a left-wing radical.
It really doesn't matter whether you're talking about the oppressed or the oppressor. An oppressive society will dehumanize and degenerate everyone involved.
Among all the women I knew, she was the most exciting.
As a middle-class Black woman, Hansberry was supposed to live a conventional life. And certainly in her early years in New York, she was not living a conventional life.
She's living this kind of parallel life and writing about it.
Lorraine became like part of my consciousness. She seemed to know something about everything. She was a profound thinker.
Lorraine was this new moment on the horizon. She set a whole new paradigm, a whole new stage for what we could now begin to expect of America and what we could begin to expect of ourselves.
It's wonderful. I just think that she would definitely be badass to use our group's name. And maybe Tracy can also talk a little bit about work that has been done here in Connecticut to actually bring her to people's awareness. So welcome, Tracy.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really delighted to be here, and I'm excited to share some ideas about how recent grads and other people can join the film industry, film and television industry. So I'm looking forward to our discussion tonight.
Thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to introduce Karyl Evans now. Karyl Evans is a 6-time Emmy Award-winning director, producer, editor, writer who has been creating films about the history of Connecticut for over 25 years, including the history of African Americans in Connecticut and also the history of Connecticut cities. Ms. Evans is in the early stages of working on a documentary project about the history of Indigenous people in the state of Connecticut, funded by Connecticut Humanities. For her last feature documentary, Letter from Italy, 1944, A New American Oratorio, where we also will see a clip shortly, Karyl directed Academy Award-winning actor Meryl Streep, who narrated the film. Here's a short promo she edited for the public television premiere of her Emmy-winning film, Letter from Italy, 1944, A New American Oratorio. And I want to thank Professor Heather Elliott Famularo, who is the department head of digital media and design, who's playing that for us.
Follow the creation of a new American oratorio written by 2 Connecticut sisters who discover the story of their father, a Yale-trained medic in the famed 10th Mountain Division, who returns from World War II to rebuild his life. Narrated by Meryl Streep, Letter from Italy 1944, A New American Oratorio offers a musical journey exploring the effects of war on a soldier and his relationships with his family. Tune in for the world broadcast premiere Thursday, June 18th at 8 on CPTV.
Thank you so much, Heather. Ms. Evans has produced a number of projects for Yale University, including the history of the Yale Medical School. She also produced films about the history of New Haven's Green and the Grove Street Cemetery. Ms. Evans was a full-time professor at Southern Connecticut State University from 2005 to 2007, teaching all aspects of filmmaking. Most recently, Ms. Evans produced a passion project about landscape architect Beatrix Farrant, which the filmmakers screened at 80 venues around the country. She's also writing a chapter for a new book on Beatrix Farrant for the Princeton Architectural Press. Karyl Evans is currently a fellow at Yale University and is the owner of Karyl Evans Production in North Haven. To see more of her documentary film work, visit carylevansproductions.com. And we are actually going to play that or list that in the chat room so that you can download it, but you can just Google her name. And let's welcome Karyl Evans.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to our discussion today.
So Karyl and Tracy Heather Strain recently were also panelists at the New Haven Documentary Film Festival last weekend. And today's panel is going to be a little bit different from last weekend's panel. And I wanted to just remind you that we have a goal scripted out that I'm just going to read now. Since there is no one-size-fits-all approach to creating your media making career, filmmakers Karyl Evans and Tracy Heather Strain will take you through a range of easy-to-implement strategies to help you get on track for employment after graduation. Tracy and Karyl will also share their ideas for people who want to pivot their careers at any age. So join us to jumpstart your career, find out how to build your network, and increase your opportunities for doing the work that you love. And so here's what's going to happen. We have viewers now on YouTube Live, but I think we're going to have much more viewers once we stream this program. But those of you who are standing by, I want to remind you to silence your microphones and to type your questions for Karyl and Tracy into the YouTube comments. And then those are going to be answered at 6 o'clock when we have, so to say, explored our own sets of questions. So let me ask the first question to Tracy Heather Strain, and then I would like to propose that Karyl gives us her side of the story too. So tell us about some of the strategies students could think about while they are still college students. What kinds of activities could they do?
So thank you. I think one of the first things that students can do, whether they're a film student or not, is to think about what aspect of the industry interests them the most, or what aspect they think interests them the most. And then I would do some research. I wouldn't just, even if you're in film classes now and television classes or video production courses, I would look online and look at books and read about people's stories and see and people do different jobs. You know, there are editors, there are directors, there's producers. There's some people who of course do all of those things, but try to think about what your personality is like and what you see about what they say their personality is like, and really think about what you want to do. I know so many people say, oh, I want to direct, or I want to produce, I want to produce. Producers are really organized people. So are editors. And to be an editor, you have to want to be able to sit for a long time, or these days you've got a standing desk, but stay with this computer for a long time to work through footage and interviews and whatever it is, and in a detailed way, and take notes and be organized. So it's a different kind of organized. Producers often wear a lot of hats, but they often have to be still on the phone, sending emails. They're often juggling a lot. But directors, you know, you have to put the pedal to the metal, especially out in the field. And are you someone who can handle the stress of suddenly having to think on your feet and make sudden decisions? The thing is, even if you are making work at a university right now, you have to think that when you get out, you're not going to be directing somebody else's project necessarily right away. And we can talk more about that later.
Thank you so much.
That's great. Yes, I agree with all of that. So I think I have found over my tenure as a producer director, this seems to be all about your network. And so I would say as a student, any group that's on campus that has, you know, anything to do with film, documentary, you know, to be involved in, because it's often somebody that you met at college or they heard about an opportunity that is going to be where you find some kind of in a company. So it's a lot about networking. So I would check that out. When I was a teacher at Southern, I always tried to get my students to find the best internship they could even possibly imagine. And so I would say, you know, this is your chance. You know, for the most part, most people aren't married with children and all these mortgage and obligations. So it is your chance if you want to fly out to California and work for DreamWorks, or you want to go to New York City and work for NBC National News. Most of the big companies have very structured internships, and it's your chance to find out. I found myself personally that internships were basically, for me, they basically determined what I didn't want to do, because I thought I would love news, but it turns out, news wasn't for me. And I did live sports for 2 years, and it was okay, but it didn't have a lot of meaning. And then feature films I liked okay, but it turned out it really was a documentary that made me feel like I was contributing to society. So it's this testing out part about what even genre you like to be involved in. And then of course you get into within that genre, what do you like to do in the genre? So I would say it's a lot about, the networking, the internships, what clubs you get involved with. That's a good place to start.
I wanted to follow up on that very quickly. What I think is interesting about both of you is that you are professionals and you're educators. So you're passionate also about the next generation. Can you describe to us, so to say, some of the qualities when you have taken on interns or taught students? What are students who, so to say, get your attention, where you think, oh, this is somebody who I could work with? What kind of qualities?
Sure. So we do have interns at the Film Posse, and what we look for interns are people that understand the job description. And for a long time, I lived in Boston, so I've had, I've worked with interns for, a long time, and sometimes students that are coming from production majors, they don't listen when we say our internships are research internships. And so some of them would come, and they were kind of bored because somehow they thought miraculously they were going to be cutting our films or something. I don't know, And we were very, very clear that we've been, most of the work we do to stay alive have been commissioned co-productions with WGBH for the PBS series American Experience. And what we can offer is a way to learn how to take archival research and content research and translate it into story. But part of that is learning how to organize that content so that you can find it when you need it, or when you need to fact check. They help us with fact checking. So I think what we're looking for are people who are actually listening, and those are the people who move up, because if you can't count on someone to do the small things, why would you think that we would entrust you with the bigger stuff where the stakes are higher? And I always tell students especially in my production courses, that on a feature set, you can get fired on the first day for getting the coffee wrong. If you can't get the coffee order, and if you're sulking while you're doing it, who's going to want you around, And then here's this great opportunity to watch and learn things. Yeah, okay, you're getting the coffee and you have a college degree, but lots of people have done that. It's not unusual. There's even people who do it with law degrees, because they want to learn the business. And there's no better way to learn it with the stakes being a little bit lower. In terms of the classroom, I look for students who actually there's so much to learn, and you can't test for everything, and you can't give reading, assignments where you're like just quizzing them on every little thing they read. The students that really stand out are the ones that do all the readings, and they've done the readings because they're asking those deeper questions, and they're not turning in their assignments in a slapdash way.
Yeah, I wrote down on time, prepared, resourceful, professional, and good attitude. I would say those are my what I look for. So there at CPTV, there's kind of a running, just the way you deal with interns is that you sit in the van, and if the shoot starts at 8 and the intern hasn't shown up on their first day, you leave without them. And that is to communicate that being on time in television is really important. It came from that live television when, you know, it was time to go live. You had to be ready, just kind of like theater and other, you know, entertainment type of professions where you have to be there at a certain time. And so that was, you know, if somebody is late for a shoot, no. And you know, that doesn't work. This whole idea about being prepared is so important because that shows that the person actually has interest. And there's nothing worse than having someone there that really isn't, just because they don't maybe like your topic of women's suffrage, but to still try to find interest and to do the reading so that they can be knowledgeable is so that they're helpful on the set. Resourceful. So the DGA out in LA, they have a director's training program, and they get all the young students there and they basically give them a scavenger hunt. And you have to find, you know, Jello, green Jello with whipped cream, put in a, you know, jar with a bow on it. And you have to find, you know, somebody with a jackknife who will give it to you and stuck in a watermelon. I mean, that's what happens on a set, is that you're always being told there's people that are loud over there, just be very nice about it, but you've got to convince people to do this for you. So there's a lot of convincing and resourcefulness and being on it. So, you know, interns often wonder, like, why am I just standing around? That's what we do. We stand around until we're needed. And then when you're needed, you've got to be like on it. So it's a lot of standing around and then it's a lot of action. I had an intern once who was on the set who laid down on the couch on the set. And it was like, you know, just professionalism in general. And I would say that might be the biggest thing that students don't realize. Everyone's watching you because you're a student. So they're watching to see how professional you are. Just the other thing about what students can do. I'm one of the organizers of the New Haven Documentary Film Festival, and there's a student competition. And I think of all the film festivals that have student competitions. And here you're put in a whole different category of all the other students that have, you know, less than wonderful resources for the most part, or they're not going to have big money for stars and they're not going to have all the best locations. And so you get used to, you know, submitting films, and you might get in a few. You can even submit a film, a short animation, a short live action, a short documentary to the Academy Awards in the students. There's a student category in there. There's all kinds of ways you can get your films seen. And then as a student, go to the film festival. So you're gonna meet all these incredible people. My friend who's a teacher at Quinnipiac every year takes her students to Sundance. And they have to figure out how to order the tickets and what they all want to see and which receptions they're going to go to. And they strategize. Oh, there's a distribution person here. If you had a film, you could talk to the distribution person. So just use all those things that are at your advantage when you're a student. Because once you graduate, people are always wondering, oh, do they just want a job? You know, what is that what they're going to ask me for? But when you're a student, people pretty much think, oh, you want advice, so you want education.
So Karyl, that's why I said to Tracy and you that you're extraordinary, because you're professionals and you're passionate educators. So I remember that my students came to your festival and it meant the world to them. There was also a foreign student who made these network connections. So that's actually a topic that I would like to go to next. One of the things that both of you, when we discussed, so to say, the course of today's questions, what both of you signaled is that it might be a good idea to get in touch with alumni from your school, people who have made it in the business. So I wanted to ask, Wesleyan, of course, and Yale have a very long, prestigious list of alumni. I'm very excited that my state university also has produced some amazing professionals. But can you give some hands-on tips? What do you do? I mean, people who are really famous, you know, certainly don't wait for your email from Connecticut to say, hello, can you get me a job? So it's very difficult to break into the business. We know that. But maybe put yourself in the shoes of somebody who is about to graduate in December 2020 in this horrible pandemic. how do they start?
Well, I think that most campuses have career centers, and usually people self-identify as individuals who are willing to talk to alums. That doesn't mean that you can't contact anybody who hasn't self-identified, but at least these people have agreed to do it. And so I recommend that the students start there with the alums who are in the industry and have self-identified as willing to talk to you about careers. And then what you do is, you're not asking for a job. Well, first of all, before you contact them, you've done your research and you know what they've done, you know about their career. Hopefully you've seen at least one of the works. And so you have a particular reason for contacting, not just because you're not going to like just pick anybody just because they have a career, they're in television, film, or media making of some sort. This goes back to what I first said. You should know what you're interested in or what you think you're interested in. Of course, it can change, but you will then contact them, combining what you know of their career and how it dovetails with your particular interest in the field. And then you're asking for an informational interview with them. And then you would do this by email and give them a way to contact you. And or if you're just seeking advice, I think the hard thing to do, well, right now we're in a pandemic, is to ask someone out for coffee. I think that's a really time-consuming thing, and people get asked to have coffee all the time, not even just for jobs. So the thing is, you start online and see if you can have a telephone conversation after you've made email contact. For people that haven't self-identified and they're still alums of your school, they might still be really receptive. You could do the same thing, but you'll have to do a little more work to figure out how to contact them. But, sometimes people don't sign up for those things because they often can get inundated, and you have to be a little patient with people and maybe even acknowledge, I know you may get contacted by a lot of alums. So I would, if you can find time in your schedule, I would really appreciate it,
Yeah, that's great. I know, just some of the more traditional ways of finding out about people, like LinkedIn, it says all the universities you're attached to. So, if you cannot find all the people that you all the people from your university that are in the business you want to be in, there's other ways to try to figure out where they graduated from. So I would, say, for instance, I decided I wanted to work for Taylor Hackford. I had seen his films and that's who I want to work with. And so I did do quite a bit of research, and I really actually had no connection with him, but he had started out as a documentary filmmaker. So I think you are trying to figure out, how do you connect? He didn't go to my university or anything. And then I actually got a publication who was interested in stories about directors in Hollywood. So when I called up, I said, I was, in my early 20s, and I said, I'm doing some articles for this, paper, and I'd love to interview you. And I must have called maybe, 10 directors for, like from Saturday Night Live and, pretty big Hollywood films that I was interested in. And every single one let me interview them. And I taped their interview, and then I wrote up these articles. And so it was my way of figuring, learning more about them, having a contact, but then having an end result, which would be this article. So that was kind of one way, I tried to contact people.
So one of the things that I find interesting when you teach production is that there's this philosophy, so to say, that everybody is a one-woman, one-man show, and you have to be able to do everything on your own. But isn't the reality that every production, even a documentary film production, relies on a team, and that this teamwork starts at college? So you can also think that if you burn some bridges with the classmates in your own classes, those are going to be the people you might come across again, that it's a small industry where you come across the same people, maybe not next year, but in 5 years or in 10 years or in 15 years. And if they see you and think, oh my God, this was an arrogant person. So tell us something about this kind of team spirit. How do you ingratiate yourself as a person and don't come across as a jerk?
Well, I think that you should be in deciding to make films for the right reason. You should want to do this because you think that you want to tell stories about people. If you're not interested in what motivates people, and because whether you're doing a documentary or a dramatic film or a comedic film, you're exploring the human condition in one way or another. And I'm not talking like you have to make a, it's not about like social justice or anything like that. I'm just like psychology, people are motivated by things. I mean, classic structure kind of works that somebody wants something and you're going to figure out whether they're going to get it or not. And in many documentaries, especially these days, are also modeled on classic, structure. So first of all, you should want to be involved because of that. If you're involved because you think it's cool or you all these other things, those are, I feel like, the things that I think were when people get arrogant. I'm going to go to this place and I'm going to do this, and and they're thinking about posting it. And I've been at these places. Usually, those are the people that when they go to those places, they are probably not getting an authentic representation. Let's say if it's a documentary, representation of the people, because they're probably not listening. They're thinking about themselves, as opposed to really diving into the work that needs to be done. And to be a documentary filmmaker, you have to be humble. You have to listen, and you have to process, and then you have to learn how to probe. And so this also has to work in the classroom too. You should be listening to your classmates. Ideally, if someone's struggling with an idea, the idea is you help them. I'd really try to foster in my classes this safe space that we're all learning. I feel like I'm always learning things, and that we will all make mistakes. You don't try to make someone feel badly about their mistakes, but you help them solve their problems. And so I think that's how you approach all of this. And I think that's how I try to approach most anything, is that you try to do your part to make things better as you're also on your journey to figure out who you are and how you're going to achieve your own goals. And I think if you operate like that in the world, then you gain allies.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Karyl, you probably agree also.
Yes. I was going to say, we're making entertainment and interesting films. And this should be a joyful experience when yes, it's hard, and yes, we work long hours, but aren't we lucky that we get to do this? I feel like every time I'm making a film, I'm like learning so much information, and you get to travel, and you get to, I remember going into an inner city boxing club and getting to talk to the boxers, and I was thinking, how would I ever get to do this? I was interviewing them and finding out why they do it, and that how important it was for them to get off the streets. And then this one boxer is telling me that everything he does is all pre-orchestrated as far as 1, 1, 2, 3. And I didn't know boxing was this whole choreographed set of steps. So I just am so appreciative that I'm getting to experience this slice of life. And I think as the director or the producer on the set, if you come in with a lightness that aren't we lucky, instead of browbeating everybody and, oh, we got to get through the day, and this is, it's going to be a long one, come on, we're so lucky. So that's how I try to foster a good sense of, collaboration on the set, and really try to make everybody feel that they're being listened to. Like, well, what do you think? And what do you think? And it's finally, the director's decision for the most part, but that you want to take people's, particular thing that they've come up with. In fact, every time I finish interviewing someone, I'll turn around and say, did anybody not hear something they had really wanted to know the answer to? And then that way people are listening the whole time because they know I'm going to ask them that. And that's a way to get them to really pay attention.
So is it important to be an outgoing person? So Tracy started telling us about these different positions, and that when you are in post-production editing, it's a very, so to say, intimate situation where you sit with the director one-on-one. If you're in pre-production, it's very different. Then you may be able to run these errands. That's again different from the set. Can you tell us if it helps that students are extroverted? Because nobody who is 18, 19, 20 likes to make phone calls these days anymore. You know, people are texting like crazy. But do you have to be an extrovert to make it? Or can you also be an introvert? And how do you find out what is a good match for you?
So I actually am not an extrovert. I used to wait to the last possible moment to make a telephone call to contact someone when I had to do like a pre-interview when I was an associate producer and things. And I used to not get certain jobs because I was perceived as, I think, not hardcore enough. I wasn't like, oh, you know, like that kind of mentality about it. And so I personally feel like how someone acts in terms of their, you know, your interpersonal discussions does not necessarily have anything to do with their ability to get things done, to be organized, and to tell a story. I think that, and for me, because of my own experience, I actually pay attention to the people who are actually quiet and are really listening, like in an interview, and they're really listening to what I say. And you can tell often when the letter, if they write a thank you letter after the interview, you can tell they were listening. And so I would rather have somebody who's processing and thinking than someone who's like, you know, just always go, 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 because go, go, go isn't always required. Tenacity, determination, being willing to, hopefully having some talent, but willing to keep developing it. These are things that aren't showy things, the showy things about the business. It looks like a lot of people are extroverted. I heard this talk with two very successful directors talking about how much they hated pitching. I thought I was the only one who hated the concept of going in and having to pitch my story, right? But here there's two women, and one was an actress, and she was talking about how she was like almost sick before she had to go to a studio or wherever, you know, a major production company to pitch a film project. So I just heard that like 3 weeks ago. So I don't think you have to be necessarily extroverted, but tenacious, yes.
Yeah, and I think you know, it's how good you do your job. You know, when people see that, oh, wow, you know, when she came in, she didn't look like she could tell the crew what to do, but boy, she really got, you know, somebody to talk about something really personal. And by the end, it was like the person's crying and, you know, she really connected with. So, you know, I think if you're good at your job, you know, people respect you for that. I will say as a female, I've been on sets where it's been kind of like all male union crews, and I've had to step it up a little bit and act like I wasn't at all intimidated by the 50 guys that were all waiting, like almost acting as if, oh, she wants to talk to us all, like we don't know what we're supposed to do next. And, you know, so I've had to step it up so I don't look like nervous or like I don't know what I'm doing. So, you know, it's kind of a combination, but I think you know, your work speaks for it yourself.
Yeah, and I also think that, can I say one other thing? I just think that these days, and I'm sure you're doing the same, is we have more choices now also about what crews we work with. And I don't work with anybody who's going to be sexist, racist, you know, gender, you know, anything that's a problem. I really only like working with people who are collaborative and who are going to, you know, work hard. I don't have crazy days, you know, we try not to have crazy days. If I ever have a crazy day, everyone knows that's a rare thing, as opposed to there's some people who every shoot is like a calamity. and no one gets lunch, and so we always make sure everyone's fed, and so we try to build teams of people who understand that and understand that they're doing we're all working together to support each other to make this shoot or go well.
I think this is unbelievable. I mean, if people take that away from our discussion today, I think this is fantastic. Both of you have been in the industry for many years. The Weinstein scandal has blown up with Me Too, and I thought it was lovely when Karyl said, you step it up, and you actually made that gesture on Zoom. And Tracy said she doesn't work with people who are racist or sexist or disrespectful. So tell us some of your war stories when you were starting out, because I think that you are incredibly accomplished, both of you. I read the long lists of awards and accolades, but it was certainly not an easy ride. So maybe tell us a little bit first, who gave you a break? Who opened that door for you so that you could start to fly? And second of all, maybe one or two war stories of things that were difficult, but where you persisted.
Yeah, so I started, I was working in advertising and direct marketing, and I wasn't happy. I actually think if I really explored, I really wanted to work on commercials, but I was in Boston at the time. They weren't doing a lot of commercials, at least the places that I was able to get into. And so I left that field. I did research because I'm really into research. I buy books on everything. So I know a lot about a lot of things before I've even experienced it. So I bought the book, Getting into Film and Making in Film. And I took everything to heart. And they said I was going to have to start at the bottom. And so I tried to, and this was the time when people literally still had typewriters on their desks and they had secretaries. And I went to an employment agency and said, I was looking for these jobs in television. And there was a place that was, the guy did something for TV, but he's like, he doesn't want somebody from Wellesley. He's looking from someone that went to Katie Gibbs. So he wanted a straight secretary. Katie Gibbs used to be a secretarial school. I think it's not that so much like that now, if it's still in existence. But he said, I said, oh, okay. So I was leaving. He said, well, there's this documentary company in Watertown. They do stuff for public television. And I was like, yeah, these are my people. And so I just made it my business to try to do whatever I could to get that job. And I got the job answering the phones, and that's how I started. And it's the time when the calls literally all came in to the receptionist. So you had to sign for the packages, order supplies, calls would bounce back if the person didn't pick up, literally wrote down the notes and, just kept track of things. And fortunately for me, I kept a few things from derailing because I realized the camera person thought this because I'm taking down all these notes, right? And I knew the producer thought that. And so I kind of said, very diplomatically, do you know that so-and-so thinks this? And I stopped one train wreck from happening. And other times, there's two other things that I did that I got off the phones in 6 months. The person who had the job before had been there for 2 years and never got off the phones. Another thing I did is we got a computer. There are 2 computers in the office. So we had to type everything for everybody on the computer with those big floppy disks. And I remember a producer running out, and she's like, Tracy, and I thought I did something wrong. And she was like, there's no typos in this letter. So it also told me something about the person that had been in the seat before.
Yes.
And then the third thing I did that really, I think, helped me get off the phones pretty quickly was there's a supply closet across from where I sat, and it was a mess. And people were always looking for things like, I can't find this, I can't find that. I kind of hate that, like when people can't figure things out for themselves. So what I did was when the phone would stop ringing, I'd run over there and I organized the closet and I put labels on everything. And then they could stop bugging me about where the red dots or where this was. And they thought that was like brilliant. And that's all I did. But it showed, it's just my natural thing, first of all, but it showed that I had, I was thinking about how to make things, easier and better and organized, for people. And I paid attention to detail. In terms of war stories, when I finally got on the road, there were just so many directors of photography that were just so rude. And they saw me as when I was a PA for a brief period of time, then I was an associate producer. I made this change when I was 26. That just saw me as like, and all the associate producers who were all female, as like, sort of like there's, like their personal assistants. They felt like they could say anything and do anything to us. And we were the ones who had hired them. We were the ones who were like giving them their per diem. We were the ones that making sure that all the trains were running on time. And I just found that horrible. And then last thing, this isn't a starting out story. So some of those people I've never hired. I've never hired any of those people. And then later, when I got my first American Experience commission, I hired someone to be the camera person for a shoot. And I hadn't been around equipment in a while, and I hadn't used this kind of light. And it was his equipment. I wanted to make sure I put it away right, because I like helping break down the set. And I asked him very politely, because I didn't want to break anything. And you're also not supposed to touch people's equipment, and unless you know what you're doing or they've asked you to, how to do something. He was so rude to me. Oh. And so I don't think he realized that I was the person who signed his check until I actually sent the check, to pay for the day. And then suddenly I was getting these like emails, and so I've never worked with him again.
Yeah. That's an incredible story.
And we have similar stories. It's so funny because, I got hired to be the production secretary, which was my very first job, but they needed a producer for all the live sports. So I kept the title of production secretary, where I did have to relieve the receptionist and answer the phone and, at the main desk and all that. But they would not change my title. I was producing shows. I was on air talent. I was creating new shows. I was editing. I was doing all these things. And but I was the production secretary. So that's a little bit of a war story. The other war story was more recent, maybe 10 years ago, where it was a sound person that had to be replaced from a DP I work with all the time. And so I didn't know this new sound person. And so when we were, there was a lot of sound issues. And I look back, and during the interview, he's got the earphones off and he's like on his phone, just, either typing or playing or whatever. And so afterwards, I went right up to him and I said, you can never do that. You for the rest of the day, you cannot have your earphones off and be playing on your cell phone. And he was just so rude to me. And he saw me, I'm the producer and the interviewer, director. And I went up to the cameraman afterwards and I said, I never want to work with him again. So, you pretty much, just Tracy said, you start getting your people. And I really hire the same crew. Sometimes it's been over 25 years, this crew at CPTV. And then I have my other crew for my non-CPTV work. And it's just so much better. And, you know each other, and that certain people have to eat right away. And then other people are more flexible, or, whatever other things. As far as, getting in, I just arrived in LA and I had no work, but I joined Women in Film, and they had a place where you could get, you could agree to volunteer. So I volunteered, and I got to work with this wonderful woman, Judy Chaikin, who I'm still friends with today. And, at first, maybe the first 2 or 3 months, it was, a free internship. And then quickly she hired me to be the associate producer on this national PBS film. And it was pretty much what Tracy said, always there, always thinking of something that got missed, always following up, making sure everything was spelled correctly, writing well, staying late if I had to. And I'll never forget one shoot where, her husband was like the treasurer of the Grammy, the Grammy people. He put orchestras together for like Frank Sinatra. And so they lived in a lovely home. And so we were having a shoot at the house. And the cars started getting all confused. And so Judy said to her son, who was the PA that day, I need you to organize the parking. This is getting out of control. He goes, I'm not going to do the parking. And I said, I will. and I was the producer. And it's like, you just do anything that needs to be done.
That's fantastic. So there is such a thing. I know sounds a little melodramatic, but I think that there is such a thing when you're an intern, you die a slow death because nobody trusts that you can do anything. And I have been interning when I started out, and I almost feel it physically, where you just have to try to get past that you think, what is my role here? How can I show that I can contribute something? And so I think you both said, don't give up, volunteer your time, stay longer, ask people what they are doing. So it's not wrong to approach people and ask them, what is your job? What are you doing? Can you take me along? So students that graduate are always thinking that something will magically appear, but that's not how the industry works. You have to get the foot in the door and make people start to like you and rely on you, right?
Yes.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, that's totally right. The other thing I would say, though, is the good thing about being a person now, a young person now, or a person wanting to make films, no matter what age you are, is that, we're all, or almost all of us, are walking around with these.
Yes.
And you can always make a film on this. And I recommend a two-pronged strategy for your career because of the easy accessibility of tools to make media. Is you should be working on your own ideas. And I think that, okay, maybe there are a lot of professional filmmakers who are working at day jobs that they don't love. Okay. But when they go home, they work on their film projects, and some of them end up going to, world's famous film festivals. But they do their day job because they want to have the benefits or the money, because it is expensive to make films. So if they can do that and they have all these credits, as an intern, why can't you just say, okay, I have this internship. I'm going to learn everything I can. I'm going to meet these people. And as Karyl said, find out what you don't like to do, even if while you're there, but start making your own films. This is like, get that network from school. And it doesn't have to be just film students, because I didn't go to film school. I wanted to do it. I studied it and I learned on the job, and I supplemented it with classes and different things. Unfortunately, I wasn't either. I didn't hook up with the people to work on my own project. It's hard to explain. It was harder to think about making your own work before, unless you had the money to do it. You have to pay for film, because video was just kind of coming into being. So now you can make stuff and you can put it on YouTube, you can put it in Vimeo, you can start gathering a following. She's not making documentaries, but Issa Rae started a web series with her friends from college and gathered a following on Facebook. I remember watching that before. I didn't, I would watch the Adventures of the Awkward Black Girl, right? And it was funny. It was, it's like low budget, but you could tell she could tell a story and that she had something. And so over time, it wasn't overnight. She ends up having, a career that, she gets a show on HBO. I'm not saying it was literally went from one thing to the next. It may have, I can't remember. But I always say, if you can develop your ability to tell a story, that's currency. That's why Shonda Rhimes has all these shows. She started as a writer. She could tell stories, and she just kept moving up the ladder, because those jobs, a lot of times on TV shows that you see that are producers, those people are actually writers. And then after they're, this kind of producer, that kind of producer, then they're working on their shows on the side. They're trying to come up with their ideas, and then they become hopefully showrunners. And that's what happened. Now she has all these shows on, right? So work on storytelling. Don't just get hung up on the slow death part. I get that. I've been an intern too. But that's my advice.
So Tracy, don't you find it's really the writers writing a story that everybody wants really sets you apart? Because most people can do a lot of the other skills, but I remember they hired this 23-year-old writer to do this film called The Long Walk Home. And so I'm working with Taylor Hackford, and they're, casting Whoopi Goldberg and Sissy Spacek, and they've got Richard Pierce is the DP, and John Bailey directing, and it's, and the writer's 23, and that's when I thought, the power of being the writer, because they really wanted that story.
Yeah, I think you talk to writers, and it's a stressful job too, as being a writer. There's a lot of insecurity. I recently actually took a writing workshop, and with this writer, and one of the things that I really thought I took to heart about what he said is the film. When you see a finished film script, that's the finished film script that a whole bunch of other people gave notes on, and the director changed, and the editor changed, and all these people. The first version of the script, the one that got green lit, yeah, that's grammatically correct, wasn't like that. And so so that it's something, yes, I think storytelling is important. I do think that you have a lot of options if you can tell stories, but I think everybody involved is a storyteller and does their part to support the story. The producers has to recognize that this story is there and is going to try to raise money and do different things to facilitate the story. The director, of course, is majorly responsible for the story. The editor, a lot of editors have saved films because they could see something in the material. Maybe the director didn't get all the shots they needed, and the editor can save the film. The people in post, they can do things with color, and especially now there's all sorts of things that they can do to make the film sing, music. So everyone is helping create this thing. And so, yes, it does start with that idea often, and especially in a dramatic thing with that, or a narrative with the script. But I see everyone playing a role in the storytelling.
One of the interesting things that I'm slowly discovering is that, like I said, our driving force, so to say, the muscle behind today's program is Professor Heather Elliott Famularo, who is the department head of digital media and design at UConn. And there are so many different areas in this new program that I had not been aware of. So our program is still pretty small, but there are all kinds of people in motion design and animation and different post-production fields. How do you, so to say, direct students towards these professions that are still emerging, that are, I thought it was interesting, Tracy, that you said you didn't go to film school, but you knew that you wanted to do research and that you had the grit to go forward. But of course, the field has also changed. And in some ways, you're both training students for professions that might not even exist yet anymore. So might yet exist, sorry. How do you prep students for these changes in the industry and how they can adapt to it?
Well, at the end of all of my courses, whether I'm talking about my storytelling course, history course, or the production course, I always end with where the field is today. And that includes where the film may be going tomorrow. So I make sure that we talk, like in documentaries, okay, you can't ignore the explosion of series right now. You can, if you're paying attention, you know that augmented reality has been around for a while, but no one's really cracked it, yet in terms of how we're going to do it. If there's going to be a convention, maybe there isn't going to be some kind of, aggregated place for things. There's virtual reality, for years now, people have been talking about the Rift, and people have been creating things, and, whether that's going to take off or not, these companies need storytellers, they need researchers, they need the people with it's called the soft skills. So they're looking for, if you want to be on the cutting edge, you should be like researching these things and looking into them and seeing what's out there and staying abreast. There's an organization, there's a group called iDocs, and they're interactive docs. There's people who've been doing web-based documentaries. There's the word transmedia isn't used as much as it was, but a few years ago, it was the buzzword. It was kind of made popular by Henry Jenkins, who used to be at MIT, is out in California now. But this idea that you're telling stories you're telling different stories, but interconnected stories on different platforms. So the quintessential example was the TV show Lost, where there was the TV show, there's all this web stuff. There was a time, hard to believe, when people wouldn't let you talk about their content and mash it up and do things, right? And then there was a book by one of the people who was supposed to be on the plane that, like it just, there's just all this stuff. And then, Game of Thrones, same thing. There's like there's all these different ways. There's a Game of Thrones cookbook, so if you're interested in that, there's ways to like connect, and most film organizations are aware of this, and they have special seminars and classes and things and ways to connect with people.
And I've really heard from people that editing, just knowing as much as you can about all the editing, all the effects, all the animation, everything that keeps it every year or every 6 months, there's a whole new transformation, and to always be knowledgeable and to take classes is really important, so that you're, staying abreast with all the technology. And especially as a young person coming up, often, you become the valuable one because you're just out of school with all these incredible skills, just like back in the day, it used to be social media. You come out with these incredible skills that a lot of people who haven't been to school for a while don't seem to have. And then why don't you use that to your advantage and come in as kind of a wizard doing, After Effects or something on the editing side that really nobody has gone to school for yet.
Yeah, and I think that it's not a problem also to kind of follow up with what you're saying, is that specialization is okay. It's great in school if you can wear all the hats, and that's fine. And there are a few people that do a lot of things. Like I think John Sayles, edits his own projects as well as directing them and raising the money, and all. He has other people working with him. And there's other examples that I'm not thinking of right now. But it's also okay to specialize. If you just want to be an editor, you can just be an editor. If you want to be a director of photography, you can work on that, because the thing is, all of these jobs take years to develop expertise. It's, connecting with Karyl said, it's you learn all the tools and you know them really well, but it takes time to know how to use that knowledge of pushing all the buttons and things and translating it into art or a compelling, narrative for whatever, platform it's going to be shown
on. I am accessing now some of the question and answers that came from our audience, but I think we can also still continue with this thread. Tracy, like you just said, and Karyl, be the wizard on the set, make yourself be indispensable. What kind of classes do you recommend students take while they're at the university in order to be cutting edge? I'm saying this because when you're in a film program, you have to take film history and world cinema, but that's not going to get you a job. Let's face it. So what kind of classes do you think students, if they haven't so to say explored all the classes in their majors, what kind of classes help them later on?
It's a hard question to answer, because you could take a lot of classes and not go out in the world and be successful because of your personality, or there's no magic class, I would say. It's really about you demonstrating that you have the passion for the field, you're really interested, and you understand the expectations that await you. And so I think you should, I am a proponent, as the person who didn't go to film school, I was an American Studies major. I think that you should study the things that interest you, because you make films about things. You don't make films about films usually. I mean, of course you can. We call them reflexive or self-reflexive films, depending. But if you are, I think psychology and Shakespeare and all sorts of things that are, a lot of times some of the really smart people that are directing and writing reference those things. If you don't, if you don't know who Puck is, or you don't get it, you don't get these things, or Or if you're interested in politics, like if you think you want to come out and make political things, well, study about things that interest you about politics or government classes. So I think that's that's my advice, and other people may disagree. Personally, we hire more people that haven't studied, not because I didn't go to film school. My husband went to Wellesley and studied film. It's just that often at the interviews, they're the people who didn't necessarily study film, or sometimes people who have studied liberal arts, say more things at the interview, or their letters are stronger. You know, there's a curiosity that comes through, as opposed to, I really want to be in the industry. There's a kind of energy that sometimes people give, whether we're talking about students or otherwise, that makes you kind of a little bit nervous that their interest in potentially working with you is not genuine, and also they're not seeing who you are, you know. So, and does that make sense?
Yeah, the head of Disney called me and say, what, because I had sent him a resume, and he called me personally. I just had to talk to the person who has their degree in horticulture to see what horticulture, why do you want to work in film? So there is something about, you're more interesting if you do have other interests, because otherwise you're kind of like everybody else. You like film. Well, everybody likes film in the film industry, basically. So, but if you have traveled to Japan and you know Japanese and you love Japanese art, or if you, for me, it was the gardens and you know, people asking me about their plants in the yard and where to go in Maine that has something to do with Beatrix Barron because they want to plan a trip with all of her sites. And people want to think that you're going to be interesting to work with. Like you've done this, you know languages, you've studied Shakespeare, you used to be in the choir, you know how to ride a motorcycle. You never know, like I ride horses. You never know when these things are going to come up where they say, oh, Carol's not afraid of horses. Have her go over and hold the horse or whatever. So people like to know that you have all these tricks up your sleeve.
Yeah, and I think if you are a major, we're not trying to say that if you are a film major, you've made the wrong decision. Within that, like you're taking the world cinema course, like dive into it and understand what was motivating the people who made the different films. What were they trying to say about humanity with each one? You know, sometimes they're just trying to explore the form and they're trying to make art, you know, I mean, you know, but if you look at the man with the movie camera, he was trying to say something, right, about the Soviet Union and the workers and the people, right?
And then I took a class about Hitchcock. And so, you know, we watched every week, you know, a Hitchcock film. I took another course about film noir so that I understood about, you know, black and white and light and shadow and conveying mood with, you know, those cinematic techniques. I took a course on how to do synopsis of film scripts. And then I decided, in order to work with Taylor Hackford's company, the way in was through the development department. And the way in, I found out, are these women that are they were all women. They sit there and they read the scripts and then they do a synopsis. And we're basically telling them which films we think which scripts would make great films. Well, I had never done that. So I took a course at UCLA. I made sure one was great. And then I sent it in and they hired me from taking that one class.
That is so cool. I also thank you for mentioning silent Russian cinema, Tracy, and Hitchcock. so film professors are not totally obsolete. But I have an interesting question here that I just see from the audience, and this resonates with both of you from what you have said earlier. If you find this passion for filmmaking later in your life, later in your career, so to say, what is the difference to people who are not coming fresh out of college, who are not 21, 22, 23, but people who are older and find that calling? What kind of advice would you give about starting later in life and reimagining yourself?
So First of all, I think for me, my advice typically is to really explore, have you researched the field? Do you know what this industry is like? Is there a way that you can get involved and keep doing whatever it is that you're doing while you test the waters? Because you don't want to necessarily leap into something like this without sort of feeling pretty sure. It's one thing to really love films. It's another thing to realize what it takes to make films. And so it becomes a challenge a lot of times because of labor laws. It's very difficult for people to hire interns, have interns that aren't getting college credit because of labor laws, US labor laws and state labor laws. But there are ways to potentially volunteer and to meet with people, potentially similar process to like what I said before about writing. Expect that the person is really busy, but if you word it in a certain way and don't seem like you think that they can solve your life over coffee, explain it all by over coffee, then they're more likely to help you and talk to you. But I have to go. I go back to the book. Now there's also books, but there's also online stuff. There's tons of stuff online. I would actually still go back to the phone and try making stuff. There's so many free resources. There's no film school site. There's you can join organizations. Right now during the pandemic, there are so many conferences and events happening online. So you don't have to be in major centers right now to like take advantage of all that's going on. You may need to join a couple of organizations or one organization and see things, but you can start seeing what people are like, what they talk about, what their challenges are, what they get excited about. And right now is a crazy time because the whole industry is like blowing up and changing. The pandemic has just accelerated it, but it's in a messy place. So everyone's a little discombobulated right now because cable is they're losing money and streaming is up and just all this stuff is happening. Oddly, appointment television has actually risen. It's just a weird time. And then you have the pandemic. So it's a strange time, but I still go back to develop your ideas, find a great book. Like I was recommending this book over the weekend called Directing the Documentary. If you're interested in documentary, grab the 7th edition of that book and do the exercises. Every chapter, the authors have exercises at the end that you can work on stuff. They even have tools on the web for self-assessment. So you can help assess. And if you do that kind of thing and you would say to someone, hey, I've been working on these things, would you give me feedback? You're showing that you've taken the step of working through something. And so it's
I would say for somebody older, basically, I think in our industry, we kind of need everything that everybody's doing in our industry. So if you're an accountant, you could be an accountant in the film industry. If you're into fashion, you could be in the costuming department. So a lot of things translate. And if you're older and you've established a long career in, research, well, then you can research for films or, there's, like I said, there's basically everything you would do on the outside you could do for the business. Now, say you don't want to be an accountant anymore, then there must be something else you love. Say you love music. Then you find, and you know a lot about music or sports, a lot about sports. Then you find a company, a director, a channel, somebody that's doing something that you have about 30 years or 20 years of expertise about, because you've learned all there is to know about sports stats. And so you find out, you could actually go and work maybe in the research department at ESPN. I'm just throwing this out. So, try to use your strengths to go in rather than just saying, oh, I just want to be a filmmaker and I'm, 70 years old but I just want to be a filmmaker now, because you've got to bring something to the table.
Right. And one other thing I would say is you have to bring to the table, you have to be up to date on technology. I'm not talking about like filmmaking technology. I mean, you have to like really know how to use your phone. You need to know how to like potentially use Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, I mean, not every job is going to require those things, but, there are companies, a lot of companies have moved to Slack. Maybe you would need to learn how to use that. And there's great sites like LinkedIn Learning where you can learn about all of these things. You can either pay for a yearly membership or you can pay for by the month. If you happen to be at a university, maybe your school already subscribes to it, but you can learn, if you don't already know Word, you can learn Word, PowerPoint, all these different things. There's ways, like I said, there's a lot of ways to learn skills, but you can't come in and say, oh, I don't know how to do those young people things. Because, yeah. Look, I actually just joined AARP. So, I'm not a spring chicken either, but I know how to do all of those things.
So I have a student who's asking, who's anonymous, he or she, what are the opportunities here in Connecticut? Because the student is saying that he or she doesn't want to leave the state. What can they do here? What kind of resources do you recommend right here in Connecticut?
There's a lot of companies and a lot going on in Connecticut. Just think about ESPN. If you had any interest in sports, the largest sports channel is in Connecticut. Down in the Stamford area, there's a lot of, A&E, and there's a lot of other production companies. Somebody just called me from LA to say they needed an assistant producer on a new show at A&E in Stamford. So there's a lot of different places doing things. And I think as a young person, you go to a big company and you're kind of a small fish and you kind of go up, or you go online. And I've had several people call me, oh, I've always wanted to work in documentary. This is my documentary. If there's any, thing I could do for you, I would love to do that for you. And, if you find somebody that you really connect with their work, like, I do mostly historical documentaries. Tracy has her, group of, you said artists, right? That you like to do, Tracy, to profile art.
Yeah, but we do historical things as well. Like, yes.
Yeah. So, try to find connections with people or go to a big company where you would have all kinds of opportunity to try a lot of different, departments.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, today it's easier than it's ever been. I mean, literally, we would have to go to a phone book and try to, look at these things. And you guys meaning the people out there that are younger or anybody who wants to stay in Connecticut, Google, Connecticut production companies, independent producers, Connecticut filmmaking. I mean, and you can do it with, this is like you're carrying a supercomputer. So it's easy to find things, but you have to then take that next step that we keep talking about. It's like, as Karyl said, you have to connect. Their work has to connect with you. The worst thing is getting letters from people that you can tell they've just sent you a form letter that they've sent out to 7 other people or more. And when we were looking for a production assistant last fall, because I just moved here last year, we posted on Indeed. We were very specific about what we were looking for and what we did. Very specific. And the resumes, we got very few resumes that people really connected with what we did. And a lot of them were people who were just looking for production jobs. And we said specifically that you had to write a cover letter because we wanted to see we used it as a writing sample. And a lot of people didn't send cover letters. It was as if they thought miraculously they'd send the resume and be like, we're hiring you, as opposed to, we only have X amount of money, or we just have this job and this is what we need for this job, and it was really fascinating. And so the person we ended up hiring turned out to be a recent graduate of Yale, who had worked in archives, had worked in, did different things. And she was working at a coffee shop at that time. And also the other thing is to connect with something you said earlier. She wasn't that kind of personality. She's more on the quiet side, but she's super smart and she does a really good job. And she's going to now move up to being an associate producer.
Oh, right.
Wow. Woo. So I have some questions that are specifically geared towards your own personal passions. So I have 2. I have to read this to you because I think I love it. You both are extremely inspiring. Who are the filmmakers you are inspired by? And then a little bit in the same vein, what are you reading now? Non-film books, fiction, non-fiction, and what are you watching on TV these days? So we are picking your brains.
It's time to watch TV. Well, I'm actually preparing for classes starting next week, so I actually am reading a lot of film books, but I don't usually read film books because, as I said before, we make our films about things, so I'm often reading the things that are the content for whatever project we're working on. So right now we're working on a film about L. Frank Baum and the wonderful Wizard of Oz and the enduring legacy of his book. So I'm actually, we're in post now, so I'm reading less, but we have to do some fact checking and things. But nonfiction, I actually been listening to things because I'm on the computer all day. I've been listening to Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, which is really fascinating. If you're interested in thinking about race and our nation, it's a really powerful book. I think maybe halfway through. She compares what's going on in the United States, which has historically gone on in the United States, with what India's caste system and what the Third Reich did, and fascinating how much the Nazis looked to the Black coats in the United States in post-Civil War America for many of the rules that they came up with for dealing with Jews. I also just finished listening to Trevor Noah's biography, which is really interesting. Filmmakers. I'm going to think about that. I have to think about that. I do. There are people that have passed. Like when I saw Eyes on the Prize, I really wanted to work for that production company. I had never seen a documentary that moved me so much. And that company was Blackside and was founded by Henry Hampton. And I had the privilege of working there while he was still alive and learning from him. And so and he didn't make all the shows. There's a team of people that worked on those 14 hours of television. And I would say those people are among my heroes. They work so hard. I heard all the war stories. When you work there at Blackside, it's a hard place to work because it's very demanding. Yeah. And they just worked so hard. Henry had to put his house up to raise the money to get that series out, and it becomes so successful. It actually came out, the year before the Civil War came out, and it's just I think that's among the team of people that created Eyes on the Prize and the guy who founded the company Blackside, which produced it.
Fantastic. Just listening to you talk, it's making me realize that a lot of what I consume often then has something to do with what I'm making, because I want to just immerse myself. I'm reading Braiding Sweetgrass about indigenous, really folk tales. That's just lovely and really prose and literary. But then I'm reading Connecticut's indigenous people and about 10 other books about Connecticut's indigenous people, as a reference, like, Connecticut is called Connecticut Indian Names, Connecticut's indigenous places, there's a lot, but I just really try to immerse myself so that in a short time, I can just get up to speed as quickly as possible. Because what happens as a filmmaker, I just did these 80 screenings, is when you get places, people think you're an expert at whatever you've made the film about. And so I want to know as much as I possibly can. That's really important to me. So it might not be directly related, but, I want to know who the authors are. And I want to know, like this wonderful film that I watched for the New Haven Documentary Film Festival. And it's Actica, and it was absolutely fantastic film. But anyway, I try to do everything I can about a subject I'm working on. And then the other film I'm working on is the suffragist film. And I just saw the PBS films that your friend Tracy made, Michelle. What's her last name?
Ferrari.
Fantastic. I mean, you know, I'm making a short little film. She did 4 hours and it was just like a treasure chest of, you know, the footage she got and the archival images. And I saw more things about the people I've been studying for the last 6 months because she found them all. And I don't have a budget like that. And my film's supposed to be 12 minutes. So, but just to, you know, just to see someone has done that kind of research and was so careful and just explain the entire story just so beautifully. So that was lovely. We had at our film festival last year, a couple of years ago, we had Alex Gibney's films, which was, you know, Client 9. And I just thought they were beautifully made. And there's somebody that will go in and, you know, sit somebody down and just ask them anything, you know, and not, you know, have any problem with asking people about, you know, terrible things that they've done. So that, you know, took a lot of courage, but it was done so artfully. So when you can do documentaries in such an artful way, you know, I really appreciate that. And I just saw Barbara Koppel's Desert One, which was beautifully done. You know, the reenactments, she had to do some animation. It's kind of a war film. And I just love when women are outside of, you know, some traditional things that people think, you know, should be done. And she did a beautiful job on that.
I'm so smitten how gracious both of you are about the accomplishment also of other directors and artists and filmmakers. I have one more question here that leads us into this notion of budgets. So Suzanne is asking about revenue from sideline media and merchandise books that can carry a project with maybe some leftover money, generating leftover money for the next project. So maybe since we only have 4 minutes left, the outlook on how you don't get intimidated by the lack of funding or by not having the budget, maybe some inspirational last minute words that you can give us on the way to persevere.
I think that it's challenging to think about making these documentaries and raising the money, but there's new models emerging, and there's models that have been there. Like I was just listening to this webinar about how the educational market is a place, or maybe ancillary things like books. So you have to, the idea now is to really not just think about film festivals or television, because you're not going to make money from that, but thinking about other ways. What are the other communities? Are there organizations or other people that you could partner with to pay you to show your work and will help spread your work? So
yeah, and I did my 80 screenings, you know, and I can't say I made any money because, you know, when you fly to California, you know, you're using a lot of money. So, but I loved it. All my stuff has been on public TV and I never see any reaction. So to actually go and there's a large audience and people are laughing and applauding, and then afterwards, oh, that was so inspirational. And now I feel, you know, so much better. And, you know, that's really why I do this, is to inspire people. So that meant a lot to me. You know, really, I hate to say more than the money, but it really was. That's why I did it. That's why I did it 80 times. You know, after 10 times, you don't make any money. But it was such a wonderful, you know, payoff for all that work. The 4 years I worked on that for no money. I had no funding for it.
So I have to agree with our anonymous student who said that both of you are incredibly inspirational. I think it's amazing that we have this network that we are kind of cobbling together. And I want to thank our leader, again, Professor Heather Elliott Famularo from UConn's Digital Media and Design department and program. And I think it's a wrap. We have 1 minute left, enough to tease 2 more events that are in the pipeline. So one is 2 weeks from now by Suzanne Colton, who is a working filmmaker and educator and designer. And she's going to be interviewed again between 5 and 6:30. And then we have 2 weeks after that, at September 24th, Dr. Agnesh Moshi, who is working behind the scenes for us, now. And she is very inspirational too, like Suzanne. She is a physicist and just kick-ass and badass. So stay tuned and stay safe, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
A lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you. Great job. All right.